Standard Time, and you are tuned into Nerd Initiative's YouTube channel, and that can only mean one thing. It is time for another edition of the Nerd Initiative Comic Department team, aka the Nerd Initiative Bullpen, bringing you Turn a Page. And for this edition, we have something special for you. A guest is gracing us with his presence to talk about a fantastic new book that you need in your collection that is dropping this week. So sit back, relax, make yourself comfy, and let's get ready to turn a page.
Welcome to Turn a Page, the official comic book club for Nerd Initiative. Each week, the NI Bullpen will be covering the world of comics, talking to creators, deep diving into some fantastic stories, and much more. Now let's hand it over to the team and turn a page.
What is going on, everybody? Thank you so much for joining us this week. My name is Ken M. You know me as the host of the ODPH podcast, but I'm also Nerd Initiative's comics editor-in-chief. To my left, your right, I don't even try doing this intro.
Coming at you live and direct, straight from a folding chair in the ODPH studio. My name is Off the Cuff Tom, your pop culture connoisseur, and it's always a pleasure to be here, Ken, and the Nerd Initiative.
Yes, and joining us is our good friend. You know him as the one half of the dynamic duo that brings you the pop culture news you need with a beverage to go along with it. It is the one and only Matt from Hops Geeks News. Matt, what's going on?
What's up, guys? It's really hard to follow Tom every time. He just gets me really amped up and excited. And then, of course, getting to sit across from David once again, it's a great time to be back, man. It's always a great time to turn a page.
Absolutely. And joining us for the first time from the Nerd Initiative Bullpen, you also know him from the Panel podcast. It's the one and only Marty Stoked. Marty, what's going on?
What's going on, guys? Really appreciate you having me here to crash this party. Happy to be have the time finally to get on this show.
Oh, absolutely. And like I said in the intro, we have a very special guest joining us because this coming week from Mad Cave Studios is a book that is perfect for the Halloween season. It is perfect any time of year round. It is one that definitely caught our attention, and we have been excited to talk about it because, trust me, when you pick this up this week, and you have to, I'm going to give away a little spoiler. This is our pick of the week.
All around the table.
All around the table of what to go pick up. It is The Devil That Wears My Face, and we are lucky to have the writer of this story on the show, but you also know him from such books as Spencer and Locke, Savage Avengers, The OZ, and coming up very shortly from Marvel Comics, the new Punisher series. Please give a warm welcome to the one and only David PEPOSE. David, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Of course. Thank you guys for having me. What a great intro. Yeah, I'm excited to be on. I'm excited to talk comics with you guys today.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like I say, we have been buzzing about this book ever since we got a chance to check it out. The whole panel is excited about this, and we can't stress enough, when you get the chance to pick this up on New Comic Book Day, run to the shops. Don't walk, run to pick this up because there's a lot going on with it. So why don't we just kind of get into how did this whole story come about?
Yeah, boy, you know, the Devil That Wears My Face has been a long time coming. And it's been not just a long time in development, but also just a long time of working with Mad Cave Studios. I've been in contact with Mark London and Chris Fernandez over at Mad Cave for years. They've been fans of my work since my first book, Spencer and Locke, and have been so kind and supportive as I've continued my career. And we would keep meeting up at conventions, and Mark and Chris would keep saying, when are you going to do something with Mad Cave? When are you going to do something with Mad Cave? And as we started talking, it was New York Comic Con 2 years ago that they said, listen, we are making a big push to expand the Mad Cave brand. We're hiring a lot of creators that you know and respect, people like Cullen Bunn, Steve Orlando, Chris Sabella. And I was like, oh, those are all people who I really do respect. I really like their work. And so we started talking about ideas, and the one that we all really galvanized on was the idea of The Devil That Wears My Face. And for those who aren't familiar with the book, the high concept is it's like Face Off meets The Exorcist. It's about it follows Father Franco Vieri, who's an 18th century Vatican priest who is grappling with a pretty profound crisis of faith. and his superiors at the Vatican send him to Spain to perform an exorcism on a Spanish nobleman's son who's been possessed by a demon known as Legion. Unfortunately, the ritual winds up backfiring, and so Vieri finds himself trapped in a stranger's body, while his own body's been hijacked by Legion, who immediately hightails it back to the Vatican to wreak havoc. So it's really been kind of a fun story. I've wanted to do a body swap story for so long, and being able to take a supernatural horror vibe to it, it really felt unique and interesting to me. And yeah, I think taking that historical element, that historical thriller vibe, it really makes The Devil That Wears My Face a book unlike anything else that I think's on the stands right now. And that's before you even include the amazing artwork of Bram Stoker Award nominee Alex Cormack, who you might know him from his work at IDW with Rich Duick on Road of Bones and Sea of Sorrows and Breath of Shadows, or The Crimson Cage over at AWA, or Alex's upcoming book at Dark Horse with Rich, Drive Like Hell, which you should also pre-order at your comic shop. Yeah, I mean, Alex is just, I think, the leading horror artist of his generation, and seeing the work that he's done on Devil, I really think it's the work of his career.
Oh, absolutely. Like we're showing some of the preview pages on the screen too. Like I say, it is a mature reader's book, so some of the imagery is very intense, but it tells the story too. And there's so much going on with this. I mean, it's not just a regular horror story. Like, I mean, when you're coming up with the concept for this, did you want to just kind of go with just a straight horror story homage, or was like, I really want to tie in some different elements and really kind of give this its own vibe?
Yeah, I think very much the latter. I mean, really, rather than coming to it from horror and figuring out how do I take a twist on horror, it was actually the opposite direction. For me, it was I wanted to do a body swap story. I'm a huge fan of Face Off. I was just the right age when that movie hit VHS, and so
It's the greatest movie of all time, all right?
It's
Nicolas Cage,
fantastic.
John Travolta, like, come on, let's get one thing, let's set the record straight real quick.
You know, structurally, those stories are always so interesting to me because you have to introduce two very well-defined characters from the jump, and then have them switch faces, switch bodies, and switch their lives, really, the context in which they operate. And so you have to really kind of have some clearly defined characters early on, so that way when they switch that context, they're still recognizable. And so I've wanted to do something like that for a long time. There's a fun kind of cat and mouse element to it. It's a fun, it's really always a parallel story structure of two guys who are both a little bit of fish out of water. It just so happens that usually the bad guy winds up finding his feet a little faster. And so it really is, it's sort of a point and counterpoint between these two characters, as one of them is trying to operate under the radar and not get caught, whereas the other one is trying desperately to prove his identity to people who he doesn't know that well. And so I think it's just a really interesting kind of conflict-laden story structure. And so for me, it was really, how do I do a different take on that? And being able to take the supernatural approach with demonic possession, it really felt like a cool way to take a new twist on the body swap conceit. And the thing that I really
this isn't like a Freaky Friday kind of thing. This is like,
I mean, I guess just maybe to some extent, there's a little bit of Freaky Friday there.
Yeah.
But the thing that I think is so cool is that exorcism and possession, in certain ways, they really are two sides of the same coin, and they each have their own types of rules and mythology. And so being able to kind of leverage one against the other, that wound up being kind of some of the more fun parts of the research of this book. And it throws in a lot of fun twists and turns that hopefully readers will really enjoy.
No, absolutely. No, go right ahead, Matt.
So how much, you talked about the research. So what were some things that you pulled from to research as far as, the religion aspects, the exorcism aspects?
Well, the most interesting thing to me was, it's the Catholic Church, not just as a religion, but as a historical and political entity. And so, when I was talking about this book originally with Mad Cave, I'm not sure. I think I might have surprised them by turning it into a period piece. And it was just as I was doing the research on all of this, when you're doing a body swap story in the present, there's a lot of electronic elements to it that, like, I think it might be a little bit of a distraction from the core concept. So I wound up doing a very deep dive, both in sort of how does the Vatican work, how does the papacy work, how does just the political structure of the Catholic Church, what's known as the Curia, and the different people inside of that. But I also just did a deep dive into the research on every single pope that has ever existed.
Wow.
I did a deep dive into sort of what is the ongoing narrative history of the Catholic Church, both as sort of a religion, but also as a political entity, because especially back then, the politics, it was just as much a political force as it was a spiritual one. And so, without spoiling too much, the Pope in our story, Pope Clementi, he was a real Pope in 1740,
Okay.
who this was sort of he was dying. He was blind and bedridden for for the end of his career, and so he was conducting the Vatican's business from his bed. And I thought that was such an interesting metaphor for what the Catholic Church looked like in 1740. Financially, they were in shambles. They were dealing with increased resistance from the Freemasons. Things were not going well. Even just what was the Roman ghetto looking like? And so we're taking a lot of these bits and pieces historically and really using that to build some nice settings for The Devil That Wears My Face. And so Vieri and Legion are going to be operating. Rome really is its own character in a lot of ways. And so they're going to be having to operate within this context. And that will give some of them, sometimes it'll give them the edge, sometimes it will give them a disadvantage. But I saw it as kind of a powder keg. And having a demon like Legion in the mix, that might be the match that causes it all to go up in flames.
So is Legion an actual like demon from the
Yes.
Catholic? Oh, nice.
Yes. Biblical demon known as Legion. That was kind of a cool thing that we did in this series. You might see it in some of the preview pages that come up later. But Legion, we have this cool visual signature effect where he's got these shadowy eyes that follow him everywhere. And that's because the biblical demon Legion was really a composite. It was sort of 1,000 demons just like stuffed into one victim. And so I thought that was kind of a cool, like almost like a hive mind. And so being able to do stuff like that was really cool. Sort of this embodiment of 1,000 different types of evil, all stuffed into one terrible creature. So yes, this is the biblical Legion.
Nice.
And unfortunately, there's no herd of pigs to banish him into.
Fair enough. Marty, you got a question you want to be asking?
Yeah, speaking of research, I did a little research on you, and I found out that you used to be a crime and politics reporter.
Yeah.
So it sounds like it's coming to fruition about how it helped you, but I'm always interested in like kind of how your whole story of getting to write comics and just be a part of this whole journey came about.
Yeah.
Coming from like a crime and politics reporter.
Well, it's so interesting because my career trajectory has certainly not been a linear one. It's been more of a zigzag pattern, and the way that my journalism training has certainly impacted it, along with kind of a slew of other things. I got my start. I'm a third generation comics reader. My grandfather was a comics fan before he passed, and my mother grew up reading comics, so I came by this naturally. I think my mother gave me a copy of Amazing Spider-Man 346 when I was like 5 years old, and I was a lifer from there. And so when I went to college, I grew up in Missouri. I did not really have any like creative role models, so to speak. The idea of having a creative full-time job, it seemed about as likely as walking on the moon to me. I didn't know anybody who did this for a living. But when I went to college, I thought, what's my astronaut job? I would love to work in the comics industry. And so I started my sophomore year. I emailed DC Comics, and I reached out. I basically banged on their door every day or every like 2 weeks, I guess, for 3 years until they finally said, okay, we'll let you in. So I interned on books like Batman R.I.P. and Final Crisis and Green Lantern Secret Origins. But that was the summer of 2008. You might remember a certain recession that took place during that time. And so there were no jobs to speak of in the comics industry. But I happened to get very lucky that incoming Batman assistant editor, Janelle Aslan, was an alum at Newsarama. And so she was kind enough to connect me to the man who wound up becoming my mentor, Troy Brownfield. So I wrote at Newsarama for many years, I think over at least a decade. I wrote reviews, and I became the reviews editor over there. And it really kind of taught me what I liked about comics and what I didn't, and kind of forced me to show my work and really articulate the things that I liked. But while I was doing that, I did spend some time as a journalist. I worked at the Berkshire Eagle in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. I covered the state politics beat, and I covered the night police beat. And so while I won't say that there were any specific crime stories that found its way into the mix, although I guess Spencer and Locke, my first book, which was a crime book, maybe had a little bit of maybe the tone of it. But for me, it was just the training of being a journalist. And I think I was able to kind of do this concurrently with two different outlets at once, is that, you're never afraid of a blank page anymore. You're never afraid of a deadline. You learn how to write modularly. I think that might be the big part of the journalism training, is that kind of all the details you want to put in a particular story. And sometimes you'll arrange them and you'll be like, no, like I'm burying the lead is a term that a lot of people use, where you're not getting like the core information out fast enough. All right, you're kind of you're not trimming the fat at the beginning of the story. So you're kind of figuring out how do you prioritize it. And so for me, I tend to write pretty modularly. Where I'll write a scene and I'll be like, the scene is not coming fast enough, or it's too long. And so I have to figure out ways how to cut it and shift it around in the script. And that's something I learned how to do at a newspaper. And so it was the best. It was the best first job I could have had, first career I could have had, really. I even before my time in Pittsfield, I interned in newsrooms in Boston and DC and Los Angeles, and to this day I still kind of miss it. I think if you ask me in my subconscious, like, how do I identify, I would still say, like, as a journalist. I think it's hard to turn your back on that sort of thing. But yeah, I think it taught me how to write fast and to kind of be resourceful with my stories. Because the thing is that when you're a journalist, like, you can't just say, oh, I got nothing today.
Yeah.
You have to kind of like figure out, like, what stones do I need to turn to find a story? And I think that really is something that's been a big survival skill for me in the comics industry, is figuring out, all right, like, if I don't have a project going on right now, what's something that I haven't done that I need to, that I could, a different genre that I could tackle, or even just like getting the word out, about my work, of just figuring out, like, okay, like, what outlets exist, and like, how do I do the research and figure out how to contact people and reach out to them. So yeah, I strongly recommend, if you have the opportunity to have a little journalism training, it's a big help for being a comics writer. I know Neil Gaiman did the same thing. But yeah, I love that job. I miss it. I still keep in contact with some of the people I worked with over there. Just a good crew of people.
No, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's such a beneficial thing too, because I mean, the amount of time when you have to come up with writing, and especially in this day and age, of just like, with scripts moving, and especially with issues you want to get out and you want to get to the public, in a timely manner too. That's such a, just a skill that we don't think about, like, as readers, of just how much goes into it. But then when you pick up an issue like The Devil That Wears My Face, and how detailed it is with its background, with its story, like you were mentioning, I mean, that just adds just another factor of, like, how impactful the story is.
Well, and another thing that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the pacing for it is fantastic. I mean, we were fortunate enough, obviously, everybody out there, that we've already read it. So, but the pacing is perfect. Like, there's not a slow panel, there's not a dead paragraph, there's not a dropped line. You hit the notes right on, you hit it right on the head. So you really are just enthralled to the next panel and the next word and the next line. So yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from, because sometimes I will get writer's block when I'm doing a review and go,
yeah, you just have to you kind of just have to keep writing. You just have to write something. Something is always better than nothing.
Yep.
And I found, especially since I've started working Marvel, the thing that's really kind of been reinforced in me is that, as the writer, you cannot be the bottleneck. I have the easiest job, just like mechanically, out of everybody on the creative team. That's why writers are able to juggle three or four books at once, whereas an artist, unless they're like an inhuman speed machine like Alex Cormack, they are a monthly book is often kind of what an artist can do. They can do those 20 pages in a 30-day span. That's just how long it takes. And so as a writer, you have to make sure that like you are, I've heard people refer to it as feeding the beast, where like you cannot let your artist not have pages. They have to have pages. And so that's sort of been the thing that has been really reinforced with me. And knock on wood, so far I have yet to miss a deadline. But that like I have to make sure that my artists have their next script in front of them before they finish the current one. Just because like if they're sitting on their hands, that really messes up the whole production schedule in a big way. And it's already hard enough for artists to get across the finish line just with the limited amount of time that they have. That it really kind of it forces me to really put my butt in the chair because if I screw this up, then the rest of the creative team down the assembly line they don't stand a chance.
That's
No,
true.
absolutely, and especially like in this situation, like what was Alex's reaction when you pitched him this idea and you gave him the script? Like, what was his initial like? Whoa, like what? Like,
Alex
what's that
is
reaction?
great. So I've been lucky enough to be buddies with Alex for a while. We have a mutual friend, Rich Duick, and he and I have come up together. And I've been a huge fan of Alex's since his work on Sync over at Comics Tribe.
Okay.
And so as I've gotten to know Alex over the years, I've always been like, oh man, like we got to work on something together. I love your work, such a huge fan. And so as I was working with Mad Cave, and I think I had a script or two in the can. We started talking about like who would be the best artist for this book. And I was like, Alex Cormack would be great for this book. He'd be fantastic. And Mad Cave, Mark and Chris over at Mad Cave, luckily were like, oh, do you know Alex? We love his work. We've never interacted with him before. Would you mind making an introduction? And so I was able to reach out to Alex and say, listen, like this is this concept and we'd be working with Mad Cave and what do you think? And Alex was so excited. He really, I love just he doesn't run away from a challenge. He really embraces it. And so for something like Devil, which requires a lot of historical research, Alex really took to the challenge in such a cool way. Without spoiling too much, there's, an issue that there's a sword fight. And Alex was immediately like, "Oh, I'm going to put on some Errol Flynn. I'm so excited." And he turned in an issue of layouts just yesterday, and we were going over them, and he was like, "Oh, I'm so excited to like start drawing this script." And so he really is. I can't say enough good things about him. Just a real mensch of a collaborator, and he's, like I said, he's inhumanly fast. He's one of the few artists that I know who is able to juggle multiple projects at once and doesn't skip a beat.
Oh, that's awesome.
Doesn't cut any corners. I mean, and not only is he so good with the mood and atmosphere that horror requires, but I love the acting that he gives all of his characters. There's so much expression. And I think that really keeps this book looking visually interesting, is that all the characters, you're seeing emotion in every single panel. I really lucked out being able to work with him. And I'm already trying to figure out like what's the next thing that Alex and I can work on together, just because this is my first full-length horror series. I've done anthology work and I've done one-shots. But, Alex is really setting the bar high for my first horror book, and so I'm eager to find something else to work with him on again soon.
You really kind of undersold how like visually interesting this is. This is a beautiful comic, like very technical. Yeah. It's beautiful. It's one of those like when you're actually going through the pages, you can almost like smell the dungeon that they're at a point, and kind of like you get those smells and those visual senses and all that kind of stuff. Like it really jumps out at you from the page, and so you don't sell yourself short. This, between the writing and the artistry in this, it is a beautiful, beautiful masterpiece.
Thank you. I always like to think of this book as the comic book equivalent of like a Predator handshake, where it's just Alex and I just kind of high-fiving and flexing those artistic biceps as much as we can. He really, I mean, he brings it in such a phenomenal way. I think this is one of the most beautiful books I've had the honor to work on, and that's all Alex. He's a one-man band. He does his own pencils, inks, and colors. He'd do his own lettering if we let him.
Oh, wow.
He really is a one-man
That's
band.
incredible.
And the fact that he's so fast and so gracious, just a really wonderful collaborator. So I know he gets embarrassed when I talk like this, but like I can't say enough good things about working with him. Just a real stand-up guy. And
Gosh,
yeah.
keep going.
No, keep going. Yeah.
Keep going. Yeah, you're
hopefully,
doing our
hopefully,
job for us.
he remembers those little people when he's really hitting the stratosphere.
No, I mean you guys are crushing it on all levels right out of the gate, and you had me hooked right from the get-go. I mean, I love when you can tell that the artist and the writer, and if there's a colorist, are completely in sync together, because you can just tell, like, the whole pacing and the flow works great. And then like just some of the character design and how you guys did the devil, or the demon, the demonic multi-eyed, craziness that goes on. Like, I'm really excited to hopefully get a reveal issues down the line of like what the thing actually looks like outside of the body. Because that's always, you always look for that crazy battle that's going to happen. And
Yeah.
I'm hoping it's going to build to something nuts, but I mean, it's incredible.
Yes.
Just hats off.
Yeah, Alex has some cool imagery for Legion. Actually, it was so fun going back and forth with Alex on the character design, because I think he and I both like to be very hands-on with that, and so that was really fun, kind of like passing the ball between each other. I wrote out kind of a character description, and I often say like, oh, here are actors that I think might fit like a similar vibe, or might kind of be in the similar visual ballpark. If I was casting this as a movie, here's who I would pick. And then Alex kind of takes his interpretation of that. And what he did, which was so great, is he would give me almost a menu where he would be like, okay, here's 4 different versions of Vieri. Are any of them sticking out at you? And here's 4 different versions of Legion, and 4 different versions of Maria, who was sort of a supporting cast member of the book, or Cardinal Pentecost, who was Vieri's mentor. And so what wound up actually happening was I would then take those designs, and I kind of played around on Photoshop a little bit, where I was like, I really like this character's eyes on this character's head, or I like this hair on this character with this other one's eyes.
You picked one from column A and one from column B.
Yeah, and Alex was so gracious about it that he's like, yeah, that rules. And so that wound up being very fun, in that, like, I feel like these characters, like, we really, it was a very collaborative effort of settling on their final looks and bringing them to life. It's been really fun, and I can tell you that Alex's design on Legion, which you'll see a little bit of in issue 1, but it's pretty spectacular, very unique looking, and I don't know if I've seen another demon like this in comics before.
It almost makes me want to see you guys do like a Constantine.
It's just another reason to pick it up,
just because.
Oh man!
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
Write your congressman. I would not say no. That I've never thought about that, but that rules. Yeah, I would totally be. I'd do that. Yeah, in a heartbeat.
Listen, DC, if you're out there listening, you're welcome. You're welcome.
We know some people who know some people, so we'll definitely be putting that up there on the social media. We need to see this happen.
Yes.
And I mean, obviously, with such a horror comic, like, what is it about horror that you think connects with the readers? Like, it's always something when you obviously this book is amazing, and it's something that's connecting even to people that are not super into horror. So yeah, for Tom especially too, because Tom is not our horror guy by any means.
I'm not allowed. My wife says so.
So, but he did get a pass for this. But just even to, like, now you see horror is kind of going through a resurgence. Like, what is it when you're writing a story that you think just is that connection to the reader?
Well, I feel like horror and comedy are 2 sides of the same coin, in that you're not just telling a story that like hits the beats of like, are you excited? Are you feeling like tense for your protagonist? That sort of general structure of a linear story. But for comedy, you're seeking an emotional reaction. You're trying to surprise people and get them to laugh. Whereas for horror, you're kind of doing a similar thing where you're seeking that emotional reaction, but it's like to kind of like make people feel like a chill down their spine, or to be like, oh my gosh, that just happened. Or, you know, sometimes just, you know, a little combination of column A and column B, where you're like, oh my God, you're kind of laughing, like seeing like, oh, that guy just got like wrecked. You know, just like the fun bits of horror. And yeah, I think it has a way of kind of prioritizing the way that you put your story together. You know, you cut down on some of the frills because you're like, what is the most immediate way of telling the story? You know, I want to follow one of my two leads, or, you know, maybe occasionally one of the supporting cast members. But yeah, you're trying to just figure out like, how do I get that emotional response? And especially doing it in a monthly book like we're doing with Devil, you know, 6-issue series. You know that like every issue you have to have a couple of these moments.
Right.
And so you really kind of wind up using that as the scaffolding in a way that you kind of you hinge your story on these beats of like what's gonna make people scared, what's gonna make people feel something. Yeah, I think it's just, you don't have to go super complicated with it. And I think that's the cool thing about horror is that you know, there's plenty of down to earth street level horror that like still makes you feel something. Or doing something. I mean, The Devil That Wears My Face, while it, you know, it's a period piece, and while there's demonic possession involved, it's still pretty street level. I've said between that and Moon Knight City of the Dead and Punisher, this is sort of my gritty street level phase. My gritty street level summer. You know, I think horror is just it has a way of focusing the way that you write. And I think, yeah, as consumers, I mean, you know, I think there's like a really fun kind of horror subculture out there, you know, in any particular medium that you're interested in, whether, you know, you're a movie buff or a comic person. You know, there's just, it really is kind of this thriving underculture, so to speak. And yeah, I think people, just like comics in general, you know, some people are raised with this. You know, they had a cool older sibling or a cool parent that, you know, brought them into the movie that maybe they were too young to see. And it became like a cool bonding experience. So I as somebody who grew up as kind of a coward, you know, I've sort of late in life been starting to embrace horror, and really I've come to respect the energy of the genre. And so that's why, having written a few comics in different genres, I felt like horror was the missing food group. I had done crime, I had done sci-fi, I had done fantasy, I had even done a little bit of YA, and yet I had never done anything full-length horror. And so, yeah, I'm excited. I couldn't have asked for a better first horror book to have written. And I really, yeah, Alex and Justin Birch are just knocking it out of the park. It's everything I could have hoped the book would have been and more.
Do you have a favorite horror movie? Like, is there any movies that you kind of pulled from inspiration wise for this as well?
Sure. Well, so as far as movies that I pulled inspiration from for this, let's see. Well, obviously, of course, The Exorcist. The Haunting of Emily Rose, I really liked. Let's see. Some other horror movies that I really enjoy. Let's see. 28 Days Later
Killer
is my
Clowns
favorite
from
one.
Outer Space.
Oh yes.
28 Days Later is probably,
my man.
I love that movie, but that probably put me off of horror for a long time because I expected all horror movies to be that visceral. I had recurring nightmares for years of fast moving, hyper virulent zombies. You know, where if it was just like a drop of blood, you're dead, or they just catch you and rip you apart. And I'm not much of a runner. So, you know, I'm trying to, others, let's see, Wreck, or you may know it as Quarantine.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
That really, I think, hits my sweet spot, in that, like, it's zombies, but it's also a little journalism-y. You know,
That's pretty self-contained in that one. That's a really good one.
Yeah,
I haven't watched that.
I like that. I recently watched The Bay. I really like that one. It's kind of a little known one. It's that it's one of the actresses from You're the Worst is in it. But I thought it was really fantastic. It was sort of like an environmental horror found footage story. I guess that doesn't really count. I was about to talk about Missing and Searching. Those aren't really horror movies, but I like those a lot, just in terms of like tension. Child's Play. Love Child's Play.
Nice. Yes.
Child's Play is classic.
Child's Play's fun. I don't know if does The Fly count.
Yeah, of course it does. Yeah,
I'll put it in
that
there.
that body horror.
Yeah,
almost,
I saw The Fly pretty late, but I was struck at how well it held up. I really I like that movie a lot. It became sort of retroactively one of my favorite Jeff Goldblum movies.
I would suggest checking out The Crazies if you haven't seen that.
Yeah, I love The Crazies.
Yeah, okay, I was gonna say that's a great one as well.
Yeah, actually, I just watched that for the first time. It was a few months ago. I loved it. Fantastic movie. Yeah, I'm gonna be kicking myself after the podcast. There's so many others. I watched every exorcism movie I could find. There was one about it was Jewish exorcism that I watched while I was doing this that I thought was a very interesting counterpoint to all this. It had Jeffrey Dean Morgan, and boy, I'm blanking on the name.
If you find that name later, like hit me up because I would love to check that one out because that's
same
up my alley.
Let's see, I'll look it up for you right now. It was called The Possession. It has Matisyahu in it. So that was a fun one.
Does he do the soundtrack?
Yeah, he did do the soundtrack. The only one that I have not seen because I didn't want to see it after I had turned in all the scripts because I was worried, am I going to have any overlap? Was I have not seen The Pope's Exorcist yet. I figured once this whole series is out, I'll check it out and see if I overlapped any on it. I'm just looking at this list right here. The Seventh Day was an interesting one. Actually, it was a funny one. It's not great, but it scratched my lizard brain. I think because I love Arnold Schwarzenegger so much. Let's see, what was it called? It's not The Eighth Day.
End of Days.
Yeah, that was it.
Oh, that's right. I forgot that movie.
Yeah, action exorcism. I think
Guns N'
that
Roses
movie was flawed, but I understand where it was coming from. The Keanu Reeves Constantine movie.
Okay.
Yes.
I
Classic.
can play that one off with my wife as a comic book movie, so I can get away with that one.
There was some
Nice.
There was a Aaron Eckhart one that I am trying to remember. That might have also been called Possession. No,
okay.
There's no way. That's that. Hold on, I'm looking at the.
I didn't mean to send you down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. Well, it's like the thing is I'm trying to remember everything I watched. Like I said, this book is actually it's been in development for so long. I connected with Mad Cave over starting this. It's going to be 2 years ago next week.
Oh wow!
So it's been in the works for a long time. Some of that was just we were so excited to work with Alex that we wanted to make sure that we could fit in his schedule. So Alex started drawing the book early this year, whereas I had the majority of it written by the time he started. I think I finished up the last third. While he was working on the early issues. I remember watching things like The Young Pope. That was really helpful. Weirdly, the Da Vinci Code movies. Just to kind of get.
I mean, there's a lot of they deal with like the Pope and a lot of Catholicism.
Yeah, just kind of getting a sense of like Rome as a place. In lieu of
Could you imagine Tom Hanks going around performing exorcisms though, real quick? Like, I feel like there's a story. That's a movie I want to watch.
I'd watch that movie. Tom Hanks, he's America's sweetheart.
Exactly.
Even in my boot.
But yeah,
Thank you. Good night.
When I'm really lock on to a high concept, I tend to do kind of the movie binge first, where I'm just like, okay, what are all the other ways that people have tackled this? And so sometimes I'm like, oh, that's a cool thing. How do I take my own twist on this? And it also just kind of gets me in the headspace. I tend to do actually, I take pretty detailed notes when I watch one of these things, just to be like, okay, like that way it helps me remember the story that much more clearly. And when something isn't like I'm not remembering, the specific plot points, I just open up that Google Doc. I'm like, oh yeah, like as I see my notes, I can kind of replay how the whole thing played out in my head. And so that winds up being very helpful in terms of this is kind of a philosophical thing for me, and I'm probably getting a little hoity-toity in the weeds, but I think it's, especially when I was starting out, the idea of creation was kind of it was mystified. It seemed like magic. And I think that's where a lot of people think, oh, you have it or you don't. And then people get discouraged. And I find that making comics, just like making anything else, like making a chair, it's a craft. And so every story that you consume was put together like a chair, where you're just kind of putting these pieces together. And so that's how I tend to do a lot of my research. I when I was teaching myself how to write comics, the same thing. I would take, I think Scott Snyder recommended, take Batman Year One. That like you break it down page to page, panel to panel, line to line. Like you just, how would you break that down into a script? And that was very helpful for me. And doing that research with the movies is very helpful as well. But yeah, boy, it was it was about a little less than 2 years ago. So I'm a little rusty on which ones I watched, but boy, I had like a laundry list of exorcism films. Some of them pretty good. Some of them you haven't heard of them for a reason.
My favorite thing to do, you go through the Amazon, the Paramount, the Peacock, and you're just getting into the really diving into the back catalogs, and you're just like, what is this?
There was one that was set in a morgue that I really liked, that had one of the kids from Road to Perdition in it. It was not Tyler Hoechlin. It was the other one, the one who got in trouble. Let's see. Why is he not in the thing? That's weird. But yeah, I know he was in a movie that. It was Emil Hirsch. That was it.
Okay. Speed Racer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exorcism movie. Let me find out what it was called. The Autopsy of Jane Doe. That movie was cool.
Yes,
that was great.
I've heard of that one.
Things like that. I was pretty omnivorous. Because you never know where you're going to get your ideas from. But yeah.
Was there
that was a long way to answer that? Sorry.
Was there any inspiration?
No
from
worries.
Inferno as well? Did you check that at all and pull any inspo?
Yeah. From that? I didn't. I can't say I drew a lot of inspiration specifically from that. Just because like the whole story is taking place like in Rome or Spain. We're not taking it like to supernatural realms, but I definitely I read it in college. So like I can't say I took a lot of direct inspiration from that one. But I could see where somebody might ask.
Nice.
No, absolutely. I mean, with this book, though, because like I say, we can't scream this enough. The Devil That Wears My Face is just proof of just how much time and dedication you put into it. The writing is fantastic. The art is phenomenal. What would you say is like a final selling point? Like if anybody's still not sold on this, because I know we got a couple of questions that have been written in, we got to get to.
Yeah.
What do you think is like the selling point? Like if anybody is still not sure, because I mean, I don't know how they can't be. Like I literally want to run down my LCS right now, go get a physical copy. What is the final selling point for this?
Yeah, I mean, if Face Off meets The Exorcist isn't enough of a selling point. Honestly, like this story is so interesting to me because it really is a parallel story. We're telling it from two different protagonists' perspectives, both Vieri and Legion, and it's this real nice cat and mouse game between the two of them, where it really is punch and counter punch. Vieri is kind of a fun character just because, like, he's got this secret to him that will sort of be teasing, and once you read issue 6, it's going to really turn the whole series on its head when you find out exactly what caused Vieri's crisis of faith. But for my money, Legion is the reason why you want to read this book. It's so fun to write a character who's just like pure vicious id, and it's kind of freeing as a writer to write a character who does not care about the rules, who kind of does his own thing. And he does it in some pretty bloody and over the top ways. So I can tell you, Alex delivers. I think we are so far on our 4th decapitation in the book so far. Yeah, just some Alex really kind of pulls out all the stops for these big gruesome moments, and you're definitely going to check those out.
Absolutely. Marty, I know you got a bunch of questions that were written in, so I'll have you kick those off.
Yeah, sure. So Owen, who writes in, was interested in how you came up with the title. I told him to read the book, but in all seriousness, like to piggyback off of that, like when do you come up with titles when you write? Like, is it right in the beginning, right in the middle, kind of towards the end of the first book? Couple of, how do you come up with that overall title?
Yeah, it's definitely in the beginning. I think for Devil, we've been thinking a lot about there was a trend in longer titles, something is killing the children, or what's the furthest place from here. And I had heard anecdotally, I don't know if it's true or not, that it was helpful for SEO purposes. But I was kind of like, okay, like that's interesting. Like a lot of these very well-respected books are trying these new kind of longer titles. So I thought trying something a little longer was interesting. And so we were batting ideas around, and that was sort of the one that like all of us felt really excited about. Was the Devil Wears My Face. But yeah, you definitely you tend to come up with those pretty early on. It's not to say that you don't occasionally make a later breaking change. You certainly, I've never done it later than the outline. What I do is an outline, or some people might call it a treatment, where you literally write out the prose version of what this book is. Like, you're not worried about panel count. You're not worried about like what are the interesting like dialogue choices you're going to use. Although occasionally you might have a zinger in there that you throw in. But it's literally it's you just bomb it out what the story is going to look like. And then once you kind of know what the story looks like, then you've got all your ingredients on the table, and you can start to kind of cook with them. So I probably wouldn't do a title after that stage. Certainly, I usually do it beforehand. Like I don't find that if I don't have a title that works, I don't think the concept works. I think that's sort of my way of saying like, okay, like if this title is good, this might be worth pursuing. But that said, I've heard from other people. I mean, I've heard of people changing the names of their books very late in the game, where they've got multiple scripts in, and they're like, oh, somebody already did that title. We got to figure that out.
Wow.
I can say, actually, I will say like my upcoming sci-fi book, Grand Theft Astro, which is still in the works. I actually we're almost done with the second issue production now. I know there was a different title to that book, and we found out that somebody else had done a book with a similar title, so we had to change something. We had to change it. So it's not unheard of, but I think trying to do have the title pretty early on, I think it just acts as a nice focusing point. That okay, this is the name of the project. Whereas if you don't have a name for it, it almost feels like a little too vague to really keep going. It's like kind of trying to fight through the mud.
Gotcha.
Awesome.
And
I got another one from our buddy Nick from None of My Friends Like Comics. He actually did a episode on Spencer and Locke, and I texted him. Yeah, so you should check it out. It was a really good episode. I texted him. I was like, hey, guess who I'm interviewing? And he's like, oh no, I'm so jealous. And I was like, you got a question for me? He's like, yep. He wants to know anything that you can tell about the inception of that book, because he loved that book.
Well, tell him thank you. Boy, it's bittersweet to think about that book this week, especially for those who follow me on social media. Our colorist on that book, Jason Smith, passed away unexpectedly last week for what I believe was heart-related complications. The way that Spencer and Locke came together, that was my very first book. And like I was saying earlier, it took me a long time to really build up permission, to give myself permission to try writing a story. You know, I didn't think it was like I couldn't wrap my head around it being a job that people did. And when I was working at Newsarama as the reviews editor, you know, you're a kid in a candy shop, but you are counted on to cover as much as humanly possible. And so you're the kid in the candy store who has to eat until you're fit to burst. And also statistically speaking, like you're not going to like 50% of the candy, you know, it's just not going to be for you. And so it would come in ebbs and flows where sometimes I'd be in a period where I love everything I was reading, or love a good chunk of what I was reading. Then there'd be times where like I really wasn't vibing on much, and I was like looking for like a book or two every week to kind of like get me over the hump till the next week. And I think I was in one of those stages where I was like, man, I'm not really vibing with a lot of what I'm reading, and I felt like I needed to make a change. Either I needed to step aside and just enjoy comics as a civilian, or I needed to make the kind of comics that I wanted to read. And I remember being very struck by books like Afterlife with Archie and Criminal, Last of the Innocent. I remember those two books, which were very interesting genre twists on the Archie mythos, really stood out at me. And I remember when Afterlife with Archie especially came out, I was like, whoa, you can make comics like this? And I loved like the subversiveness of it, and that it was like so intense, but also so funny. And so I thought, you know, what would I do if I was doing something like that? I remember growing up, Frank Miller was a big, he was the first writer that stood out to me as a kid, that I realized like, oh, real writers do this. Like his voice stood out to me so much. And so I said, what's the weirdest thing I could throw up against old school Frank Miller that would kind of make this thing click? And you know, the thing is like I knew pretty early on, you can throw anything against anything and like you can do a first issue out of it. But if there isn't like a reason to do it, like shock value is not going to be enough. Like there needs to be like an actual through line to all of this. And so I was throwing together all sorts of weird combinations, and none of them were clicking. And then I thought, what about Bill Watterson, Calvin and Hobbes? And the light bulb just like clicked. It just flashed on. I imagined this like hard-boiled cop, like all beat up and like grinning in the rain. And he's holding a stuffed animal. And I thought, oh, like, what's that guy like? What was his upbringing like? What was his home life like? And that really became the spine of Spencer and Locke. For those who haven't read it, it's what if Calvin and Hobbes grew up in Sin City? And it follows hard-boiled detective. Thank you. It follows hard-boiled detective Locke as he investigates the murder of his childhood sweetheart. And his partner happens to be his 7-foot-tall imaginary Blue Panther, Spencer. And sort of it becomes like a bit of a character study as Locke and Spencer are kind of uncovering what happened to this woman. Is we see these Bill Watterson-esque flashbacks to Locke's childhood. We see that like he's grappling with some pretty profound trauma and mental illness as a result of this like terrible abusive upbringing where like anything that could go wrong for him did. And yeah, boy, it was, you know, I still can't believe that book got made, and that we managed to stick the landing on it, that people responded as well as they did. That was part of the reason why it took so long for me to do a second volume, was because I was half convinced I was going to get run out of the industry for that book.
Oh, wow.
There's no more of a sacred cow in comics than Bill Watterson's Calvin and Hobbes, and with good reason. I mean, the man's a trailblazer. He's a pioneer. You know, he his economy of line and just the way that he was able to really kind of stretch himself stylistically. It's a once in a generation achievement, that strip. And so I think the way we approached it was, you know, it was with all the love and affection. You know, Calvin and Hobbes was the very first strip that I ever read as a kid. My grandfather used to read the collections to me. And my mother still has the strips up in her office. So yeah, I just I came by it honestly and with all the love and respect I could muster, and thankfully people really responded to it. But yeah, really that whole book was just me dipping my toe into the pool until I kind of accidentally fell into the deep end. And accidentally got a creative team and accidentally got a publisher. Nobody is more surprised about it than I am, but it's one of the best decisions I've ever made.
No, absolutely. No, the book is fantastic, and our deepest condolences
awesome.
out to Jason's family, friends, and fans.
Yeah.
I know from his work with Spencer, and then he also was the colorist on the Pocus Hocus team for
Yep.
Yeah.
Alan Dunford and company there. So,
Yeah.
with another book that was coming out too, and I mean, I have the graphic, but I also have to hold up my autographed copy, and that is the OZ.
Thank you.
Yo, absolutely. No, I love this series, and I know that the fans have been asking me. I've been hit up by a couple people, and I know we talked off air about this, but I need to know the official thing
Yeah.
for
Happy to give
publicly.
you the official scoop.
Yeah,
We are hard at. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, what is the official status on issue 3?
Yeah, we are hard at work on issue 3. The OZ has been written for a long time, so I never want people to think like, oh, it's his Marvel work, like keeping him from doing it. Quite the contrary. That book, I had written the whole series before we launched the first Kickstarter, so it's been done for some time, minus little tweaks here and there as the art comes in, which is standard for any comic. It's honestly, some of it was just that, issue 2 came out later than we would have liked. There was just kind of, we literally had to survive a hurricane to get that second issue out. There was our printer, had some issues getting the books to us. There's paper shortages going on. There's nobody to blame on that. It's just, the way that the world is right now. Post pandemic. But Ruben Rojas has been really hard at work on the book. He is almost halfway finished through issue 3, which is where I wanted us to be before I felt comfortable doing a Kickstarter. And then Whitney Kogar is hard at work on the colors as well. She has been juggling quite a few projects, so I understand that her schedule is a little bit of a moving target right now. But that's kind of where we're at. Ruben is almost done with the first half of that book. And once Whitney has the colors together, we can start figuring out a timeline for the next Kickstarter. I think we were talking about this off air, but it's probably a little too late in 2023 to do another Kickstarter. Usually the November period is kind of a dead zone, November, December, January. And honestly, I'm not even super confident about February. I don't think that's a super great launch time. So I would love to do something in March, April, May of next year. We'll have wrapped up Moon Knight City of the Dead, and Devil That Wears My Face will be all wrapped up. And so that'll be a good time for me to also be able to focus all of the spotlight on my work towards that Kickstarter, and really just kind of do that last Kickstarter with as much force and verve as humanly possible.
Well, I'm already booking you to come back on the show for that, so definitely.
I'm excited. Let's do it.
We'll definitely need to talk about it there. And before we let you get out of here, I've been getting hit up, and I know the rest of the bullpen here has been getting hit up about another Marvel project you have coming out.
Sure.
Fairly in the near future. I believe November is the announced date, and that is the new Punisher series. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. Boy, I'm so excited for our new Punisher series to come out. First issue drops November 8th, and you can still pre-order it at your local comic shop now. I'm super excited. When Marvel hit me up to do this series, I had written Punisher 2099 in the pages of Savage Avengers, and my editor Tom Brevoort liked what I did with Jake Gallows, and so he approached me and said, "Hey, listen, we would love for you to take over Punisher." And I said, "Oh, okay, that's cool. I'm very excited but here's the twist: we're going to be introducing a brand new Punisher, a new legacy character, and so." It was really cool opportunity to just try something new. I know legacy characters often are polarizing. People are always they get very nervous about what is it going to look like, what is it going to mean for the characters that I know and love. For those who read Jason Aaron's run on Punisher, only minor spoilers. Frank Castle is off doing his own thing in the steps of Weird World. And so this was kind of the perfect opportunity to really hit the ground running with something that's like totally brand new. I've always said legacy characters feel like a centrifuge. You know, it really kind of helps you cycle out like what are the core characteristics of a character that like it wouldn't be them if you don't have these things. You know, for the Punisher, I always think about like the tenacity, the badass attitude, the grit, the ruthlessness, the willingness to kind of like take a hit if it means to take out the other guy. But it's also then figuring out like, well, how are different ways we can do this? So our new Punisher is a guy by the name of Joe Garrison, who's an ex-Shield Wetworks agent. He's
Okay.
they called him the Gravedigger of Shield, and Joe retired to pursue the call of family. And unfortunately, as our series opens up, someone has blown up his house with Joe's family still inside, and the police are inclined to think the husband did it. And so Joe is on the run using his particularly deadly set of skills to try to figure out who set him up and why. I've been billing this book as this origin story in particular as John Wick meets the fugitive.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
That John Wick element, you know,
Nice.
I don't take that lightly. In that was sort of when we were discussing how do we do this Punisher differently. You know, we talked about the Shield background. We talked about using that Shield armory, and I want people to know that does not mean that this is a non-lethal Punisher. He's not going to be like hugging people to death. You know,
He is just with his bicep around their
Yeah.
neck.
By cuddles.
You know, it by taking the elevated Shield armory, it just gave us more opportunities to like do different weapons for different situations. But you know, the title of our first issue is The Bullet That Follows. You can see in our preview pages, there's a ton of headshots going on, even in our preview art. So this is not a Punisher who's going to be letting people off the hook. But what I thought was so interesting is that when you meet Frank Castle in the pages of, I believe it's Amazing Spider-Man 129, you know, he's already the Punisher. He's made that decision. Frank has been marinating in that loss for quite some time, to the point where he has adopted a whole new identity and is, you know, committing extrajudicial vigilantism. Whereas for Joe, the wounds are still very fresh, and so this is very much how do you go from being sort of a one man's personal mission, which is something that does have an end date, to a mission that goes wide and maybe is something ended. I've said, and people always ask, you know, like, how would somebody take on the mantle of the Punisher in the year 2023? And that is really kind of a core part of what this story is about. You know, there are some legacies that you choose for yourself. There are other legacies that find you. And you'll see, even in our first issue, you know, you'll see that this is not as cut and dry as you might expect. And Joe, it's a legacy that's going to find him.
Nice.
So, I will
still
say,
can't wait to pick this up.
Same.
Awesome.
the thing is, I don't bring up John Wick lightly. That was another cool part about this character is I said, how would you approach the Punisher differently? And I thought taking the gun fu approach, I thought was a really exciting and cool way to do something different with the character. You know, to borrow some comparisons from our friends across the street. You know, it's sort of like a Bruce Wayne and Cassandra Cain. You know, that they would approach each situation very differently. And so for Joe, it's not just about the hardware. It's also just the way that he moves through a crowd and he's picking them off one by one using his shield pistols. But also, he doesn't need those guns. He's really a born improviser, and he likes to use, well, he doesn't like, but he tends to use the environment around him to help kind of close the gap. And so that's
Is that born like BORUNE? Born improviser.
Yeah, right. You know, a little
played.
bit. It's cool because that means that you can drop Joe anywhere. You know, in a restaurant, in an office building, in a nightclub. You know, in Atlantis if you wanted to. And it's how's he going to fight his way out? And that was what I thought was particularly cool. I mean, we talked at length. You know, there's a lot of people with a lot of questions of like, how do you do a new Punisher? How do you do a new Punisher knowing how controversial the character is? And for me, I think it's all about going back to the core of it, which is Jerry Conway talked about. It's a failing of society if a man like the Punisher is needed, and a man like the Punisher exists. And I remember having a very spirited conversation with a diehard Punisher fan at Baltimore Comic-Con a few weeks ago. He was wearing a Punisher T-shirt, a Punisher baseball cap, and had a Punisher mug with him. So he really
that's
was a
dedication.
big fan of the Punisher. And he, I think when I talked about, we're doing a new legacy character, the Punisher. At first he had a lot of trepidation, and I asked him. I said, "Don't you feel like the system feels rigged against the little guy?" And he kind of did a double take, and he was like, "Yeah." And I said, "I think that's what the Punisher ultimately is about. When you kind of go full circle and you go beyond." I think Garth Ennis is great as well, but like, sort of that's like the ultra violence. It's almost like cartoonish, like gleeful. When you kind of go back full circle to like the Punisher, it really is like when society can't help you, when there are cracks in the system because of the politicians and because enforcement cards are stacked against you societally. If nobody can help you, maybe you need a Punisher to help you settle the score. And that's really kind of my overarching where I would like Joe to be. And that's sort of where we're hoping that he'll go beyond his origin story, is that, it's a Punisher for the little guy. And I think that's the way you really circle that square. I don't subscribe to the binary that if you're a fan of Frank Castle, you're a bad person. And I don't subscribe to the only way that you can tell Punisher stories is by punching down on somebody else. For me, that I've been asking since I took this assignment is, how do we build a bigger table? One that doesn't sacrifice the core qualities that's made the Punisher endure for this is the character's 50-year anniversary. But at the same time, does so in a way that existing Punisher fans can still find something to enjoy. People who have not read the character can find something to enjoy. People who have had a problem with the character can find something to enjoy. And I really do believe that there's room at the table for everybody. And I can tell you that Dave Wachter is doing spectacular artwork. This is he and colorist Dan Brown, this might be the most beautiful book I've done at Marvel to date. To say that it diminishes any of the intensity of it, but Dave is just a powerhouse. And he and Dan, they play really nicely off of each other. So yeah, I can't wait for readers to check this out. We've put in a lot of work on this one. This has been the longest development process of any project I've done at Marvel by a significant margin. And it's because we hashed it out from top to bottom because we wanted to do it right. And so I'm very excited for readers to get to see what we're doing and to really see all the love and energy that we've been putting into this book.
No, absolutely. Like, I mean,
awesome.
I was already sold when I heard when you were writing this book. Now, like, I need to get like multiple copies. Not that I was planning on doing that, but now
please do. Like, don't let me stop you.
Oh no. I mean, because if you take a look from everything you've done with Marvel alone, let alone to the body of work that you have with Spencer and Locke and the OZ and Savage Avengers, which is a phenomenal read, and if you have not picked that up, you need to go. I'd have
written that for 100 issues if the market could sustain it. I love that book. Is the best first book at Marvel I could have possibly asked for.
The art with that and Carlo Magno, like, it just. And like now I'm greedy because I'm like I'm hoping this series there's a Cloak and Dagger cameo because of how you wrote them, because it was just picture perfect.
Oh, thank you. No plans currently, but never say never. Boy, I could probably. I'm sure Tom Brevoort would get a kick out of me being like, "Can I throw a Cloak and Dagger in somewhere?" And he's like, "I again." But yes, I was the one that beat down the door asking for Cloak and Dagger.
Thank you.
I said, if you give me nobody else on this team, please give me Cloak and Dagger. And my editors had to be like, nobody's asking for Cloak and Dagger. You're fine if you want them. Yes, wanted them to be Avengers for 15
Who do
years.
I need to email?
I got my wish.
Yeah, I was going to say, who do I need to email? Cloak and Dagger, I think, is like the most underrated duo in Marvel. And how you brought them.
They're going to be in Rodney Barnes's upcoming Luke Cage Gang War or City of War.
For Gang War.
Yeah, they're going to be in that Luke Cage series, I believe. So pick it up. I saw that on Rodney's
Street
Twitter
level.
today, and I was very excited. Big Cloak and Dagger fan right here.
No, absolutely. Like I'm right there with you. And how you wrote him on the team is just like I can't recommend that series enough. Like seriously, Savage Avengers, both volumes are must
Thank you.
reads.
Thank
So-
you. Please do. Please order them at your local comic shop. My dog's kibble doesn't come cheap. So get some for yourself, for your friends, for your families, for the holidays. Savage Avengers. I loved writing that book, and I'm so proud of the work that Carlos and I were able to do on that together.
Yeah, and that's why we have the QR code above me that says find your LCS. So you go down there and you make sure you go order that book. You go order Spencer and Locke, and then make sure especially to go down this Wednesday and pick up The Devil That Wears My Face, because trust me, if you're not into horror, you're going to love the series. If you're into horror, you're going to absolutely love the series. And we're going to be talking about this for many, many months to come, because like I say, this is a dynamic first issue that you will not be disappointed with when you pick this up, and you definitely need to make sure we are spreading the word to all the comic fans about this on New Comic Book Day tomorrow.
Speaking of which, with New York coming up, how many copies of this are you going to be bringing down to your table?
Boy, that is a good question. That TBD. I don't know. Definitely, I'll be doing a signing on Friday at the Mad Cave Studios booth with Alex Cormack and our variant cover artist Mon House. It'll be Friday the 13th at noon at the Mad Cave Studios.
Spoopy.
So definitely make sure that if you want some things signed for Devil That Wears My Face, definitely 100% be sure to stop by there. I don't know how many copies my reps will have because it'll be brand new, and how many I'll be able to secure from my local shops here in LA. But I will be asking Mad Cave if I can buy some copies off of them. So fingers crossed we'll have some at the Comic Sketch Art booth as well.
I might have
Definitely.
to send a copy out your guys' way since
Please do.
my
Send it
birthday's
to us.
next weekend and I'm not going to make it up, so I might have to do that for a little action. We'll talk on the side because I'm going to.
Yeah, we'll talk off air.
for sure.
Yeah, we'll definitely figure something out for that.
We'll figure something out for you. No problem.
I'll
Yeah.
put it in Ken's suitcase.
Yeah, I know. Like I'm gonna be coming out like this from New York Comic Con, but that's all
I
right.
know.
That's the beauty of going. So just add it on the list. We'll make that happen. David, thank you again for taking the time out to talk to us. And listen, audience, I can't scream this enough. Make sure you go to your comic shop tomorrow. Go pick this book up and go get some more of David's work. It's phenomenal. You won't be disappointed no matter what you pick up, no matter what you're a fan of. You need to go do it. We have his link in the liner notes for this YouTube podcast episode. So we definitely want to make sure you're doing. And definitely we're locking you in to come back to talk the OZ at least. If
Please.
not, maybe
Looking
we'll talk some
forward to
Punisher. All right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Marty, thank you for taking the time out to talk to us. Why don't you tell everybody how they can find you and everything going on?
Sure. Thanks for having me again. I'm at Marty Stoked on all social media platforms, all 855,471 of them now, because everybody comes up with a new one every day. And you can catch me on Nerd Initiative writing comic reviews.
Absolutely. Matt, why don't you let everybody know how to find you?
Same, all those nice social media sites, Hopsgeek News, and shameless plug for Savage Avengers. If you want to hear David talk a little bit about it, he was on the show, I believe it was back in May. So come follow us, come check out that interview. It was a lot of fun. It was great getting to sit down and chat again, of course. And man, I'm really, really, really pumped to get my hands on the Punisher and anything and everything that you touch, because if you're sleeping on David, any of his writings right now, you're missing out on a lot of great stories.
Thank you, buddy. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all the support, and for everybody listening, thank you. It really takes a village to get any success in this industry. I feel so fortunate for the work that I've been able to do and the publishers I've been able to work for. I think it's because I've had a village of readers, retailers, and press that have been supporting me every step of the way. So I'm grateful, and just know that your support, it keeps me getting up every day and make sure that I take my biggest swings possible.
Absolutely. Tom?
Put the thing on the thing.
There you go.
You can find me there. All the socials, all the reviews, all the
Put
things
the
to talk
thing on the
about,
thing.
all my pictures of my cats right there on the social medias, off the cuff Tom, everywhere you know.
Absolutely. And for anything and everything that is the ODPH, you can find it at odphpodcast.com. You can hit the QR code. Or better yet, remember, tomorrow is New Comic Book Day as we're recording. And if you need to know what to pick up at the comic shops, simple. You swing on over to nerdinitiative.com, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and reviews are dropping every hour on the hour of the picks of the week. If we're not talking about it, you don't need to pick it up. But that's why we're saying right now, this is the official kickoff right now. That's why you need The Devil Wears My Face. You need this book tomorrow. We can't scream it enough. So this is the official kickoff to New Comic Book Day. Because if you don't have this next week, we will be talking to you all on social media about this. That you've made a grave error and you need to go fix this and you need to go buy an extra
If
copy.
you don't buy it, Legion will literally come to your house and possess you next. So
absolutely
possess all of your toddler children and make them never go to sleep. So
yes. And as always, thank you for listening and watching Nerd Initiatives Turn a Page. And remember, when you're at the comic shops and you have a great issue in your hand and you see somebody struggling to pick one up, remember, hand yours off to them and tell them to turn a page. We'll see you next time.